Today we'll be talking about cybersecurity lessons from Jurassic Park. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with the movie, but I just want to clarify that we'll be talking about Jurassic Park and not Jurassic World, or the million other versions that we have so far. I'm going to start off with a quote from Michael Crichton, who is the author of Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park's based on a novel, for those of you who are not familiar. And this is one of his most popular quotes. In the information society, nobody thinks. We expected to banish paper, but we actually banished thought. We'll talk about what this means in the context of Jurassic Park and also modern incidents in cybersecurity. First, a little bit about me. So, just like Michael Crichton, big fan of dinosaurs. You can see me with T-Rex in UC Berkeley there. I also enjoy, flying planes. It's been kind of difficult to just even explain what I do these days. I guess I would call myself a cybersecurity researcher and YouTuber. So some of you may know me from the PC Security channel, which is now like one of the most popular cybersecurity channels on YouTube. So if you enjoy content on, testing different cybersecurity products, following the latest threats, stuff like that, you can find it on there. But now we're going to enter the world of Jurassic Park. And we'll be talking about this, as I mentioned, and not whatever this is. So, Jurassic Park at its core is a story of systems analysis, and it's actually a story about malware. Many of you may not be familiar with what I'm talking about if you haven't seen it in a long time. It's about dinosaurs, right? Well, the dinosaurs only become relevant when the malware is executed, and there's a very clear execute button there. So I'm going to play a brief clip from the movie just to remind you what this is like. Hopefully we can get some audio.
Access main program. Access main security. Access main program grid.
You didn't say the magic word.
Please! God damn it! I hate this hacker crap! Phone address, Cambridge. Phones are out too. Where did the vehicle stop?
Of course, in the most convenient location, right in front of the Tyrannosaurus, as I was talking about. So hopefully that, gave you a bit of nostalgia. But as you can tell, what does that remind you of? What does the main malware screen in Jurassic Park, the main prompt, remind you of? Well, modern ransomware. It's literally the same kind of message. It's you can't access your systems. And of course, in Jurassic Park, it was deployed by an insider threat. Modern ransomware, typically, hackers deploying it within your network. But it's the same effect. And we're going to talk about the systems of Jurassic Park and how similar they were to the systems that we're going to look at, which are modern systems. And the movie was ahead of its time, as well as the novel in more ways than one. I mean, obviously visual effects and all that, but also in terms of the problems we're dealing with today. So at its core, Jurassic Park is about complexity and control. So one of the core concepts of Jurassic Park is chaos theory. There are two main scientific, underpinnings of Jurassic Park. One is chaos theory, and the other is the idea of fractals. So we're going to talk a little bit about chaos theory. Chaos theory is this idea that complex systems are inherently unpredictable. So we have this quote from the book itself. Chaos theory teaches us that straight linearity, which we take for granted in everything from physics to fiction, simply does not exist. Linearity is an artificial way of viewing the world. Real life isn't a series of interconnected events occurring one after another. It's a series of encounters in which one event may change all the others that follow in an unpredictable way. And this applies to a lot of incidents. We like to think of things as a chain. It's like one thing happens and then another thing follows and then the thing follows from that. But in reality, these are complex systems which are interacting, and one interaction can affect everything else. And there's no better example of that than the latest CrowdStrike incident. So here we have, this is actually the thumbnail of my video, but as you can tell, like we have, two sides. It's basically planes taking off from the United States, one before the update and one after the update. You can see how the planes just stop taking off. There are no planes in the air after the CrowdStrike update goes live. Now, I'm pretty sure when you're going to the airport, you're not thinking about, well, whether or not I'm going to take my flight. Let me check what updates CrowdStrike has released and the stability of that. It's like, no, you don't think that that's part of the system. We just take it for granted. But in reality, that's what chaos theory means. There could be something within the whole system that you may not be aware of even exists, but these, interconnections lead to unpredictable events. So the other concept that Jurassic Park covers is fractals. So here we have an example of the dragon curve, which is, fractal geometry. Now, you may have heard of fractals in the context of video games. So games like Minecraft, where everything is generated from the concept of blocks stacking together. Here's an example of a mountain. Now, the idea of fractals is that everything, the world is made up of repeating patterns. So, for example, if you look at a mountain range, like from a distance, it has a particular shape. Now, you zoom into that range, you look at a particular mountain, you see, well, it's the same thing. And the more you zoom in, you realize, well, it's the same thing, right? Like you look at one part of the range and you could repeat that and get a bigger mountain range. And in Jurassic Park, it's implied that this kind of sameness or repeatability applies also to events in time. So in terms of failures in Jurassic Park, they stack up. It's a repeating pattern. And in the book, this is mentioned in iterations. So, for example, in the initial iterations, we have quotes from Ian Malcolm, who is one of the main characters, saying, instabilities begin to appear. And then once the pattern is really complex, it says system recovery may not prove possible. So now we're going to delve into the fun part, comparing Jurassic Park to the systems we work with today. And we're going to start off with the concept of automation. Now, automation is great. We all love it. It means we have to do less stuff. But Jurassic Park is a case study of how automation can go wrong. So Jurassic Park decided on this state-of-the-art technology of, who needs drivers, right? Driverless cars. Isn't that great? We talk about that a lot today. Decided we're going to have all of our park attractions on this main track where these electric cars, totally non-polluting, top of the line, spared no expense, as Hammond says in the movie. They go on this track, and basically, you don't need to drive them, because why would you? I mean, that's all well and good. And of course, they look fancy, spared no expense, but when you have a T-Rex chasing you and the power goes out, well, guess what you need? Gasoline-powered Jeep. That's how they get out in the end. So here's the funny thing. Jurassic Park, this is another case study of how to invest your resources. So Hammond, he talks about, sparing no expense when he talks about, like, the chef in Jurassic Park, when he talks about the voiceover effects. But the one place he did actually decide to save money was on the one developer who made the whole system. So if you've seen the movie, you might think of Nedry, the main developer of Jurassic Park, as this evil character who takes money from a competitor to run this malware. But if you go through the book, there's a bit more of a background to it. So apparently, Nedry was, quite annoyed with the project because late in the schedule, they wanted extensive modifications and didn't want to pay for it. And they wanted it to be included as part of the original contract. They threatened lawsuits and implied he was unreliable. And in the end, he had to basically pay that out of pocket. And this is one of the main reasons Nedry decides to go ahead and work with a competitor to make a ton of money and become an insider threat. Now, Nedry's example may not be very common in our current world of cybersecurity, but what is quite common is the idea of an insider threat, or even an outside contractor like Nedry, who is, in a not necessarily fully part of the organization, but you hire a contractor to do certain things. Now, if they get compromised, that can obviously lead to unwanted consequences. Now, here's a funny thing. So, problems in the security systems of Jurassic Park, and this is a quote from the book. They were high on the bug list, but it wasn't a bug. He had programmed it that way. It's what you would call a classic trapdoor. And this is quite common, right? It's like the router having the admin password at the back. Partly it's like, he wanted to have a way of getting into the systems if something got messed up and he had to come in and reset them. But of course, he used it for other reasons, as you can see. Now, one of the main things about the idea of Jurassic Park is the concept of unintended consequences. And we'll get to that malware code. We actually have a snippet from the actual code that was used in the book. But the main idea here is when we take certain actions, especially when we're deploying systems in the real world, we often think that whatever program we're running, whatever procedure or process we're deploying, it's going to only have the consequences that we anticipate. And this is a very common way of thinking, especially if you're a software developer. You're like, oh, I wrote this code to do this, and then you run it and something completely unexpected happens. Because, again, it's the law of unintended consequences. So Nedry never intended for the dinosaurs to get out. He obviously just wanted to quickly go to the dock, drop off the embryos, and as a result, gain a few $1 million. But the unintended consequence was that the entire park systems, when you disable the fences, all the animals can get out, basically. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the complexity of Jurassic Park and how that's relevant. So when they're trying to diagnose what's going on with the systems, Jurassic Park had 4 million lines of code. And when they're trying to go through it, it's like, what are you doing? Checking the code by inspection? That'll take forever. Tell me, Arnold said. Tell me. And I think we've all been there, where, you have poorly documented code that's scattered across an organization, and it's in the moment of crisis that you actually have to figure out what this does. And that's exactly what happens in Jurassic Park. Now, this is the actual code that's referenced in the books. And as you can see, it takes them quite a while to discover that, at the end of the day, this wasn't really a case of the code malfunctioning. There's a very specific object call that linked the security and perimeter fences and set them to off. That's the one that's indicated by the arrows. What's quite interesting as well is the notion of objects and object-oriented programming, considering how old the movie is. So I highly recommend, for those of you who are interested in explanations of these things, go read the book. It's got some really high-level details on it. So obviously all of this leads to the fun part, which is the T-Rex breaks out and, the park starts falling apart. Now, another core concept of Jurassic Park is the notion that the system was inherently simple and controllable. After all, it's just a zoo, it's just a bunch of animals, why can't we control it? But, this quote kind of goes into detail as to why that's a problem. So you look at that, that's your simple idea. You create new life forms, which you know nothing about. Dr. Wu doesn't even know the names of the things he's creating. He cannot be bothered with such details as what the thing is called, let alone what it is. You never learn anything about them, yet you expect them to do your bidding, and you forget how little you know about them, and how incompetent you are to do the things that you so frivolously call simple. And the reason you have a situation like that, and it's quite common these days, is because of the nature of abstraction. So abstraction, we are told, is a good thing, right? Like when you're writing programs, you want to abstract it as much as possible because that means the decision maker doesn't need to know exactly how the code functions, right? So we have people with different levels of knowledge. Each of them can focus on their own thing without understanding anything else. Now, that's well and good until you have a situation where you need broader context. So another quote from Jurassic Park that talks about this is when he's talking about the scientists of Jurassic Park, because, it suggests that they're so smart. But Malcolm says, well, they're smart, but they're technicians. They don't have intelligence. They have what I like to call thin-telligence. They see the immediate situation, then they think narrowly and call it being focused, but they don't see the surround. they don't see the consequences. That's how you get an island like this from thin intelligent thinking. Now, when you think about the CrowdStrike update, again, very strong parallels. I'm pretty sure the developer who was working on the behavioral detection rules that were deployed was just thinking about what the detection rules would do. They're not worried about, well, what if this affects the driver in some strange way and causes instability? And then he wasn't thinking about, well, there's so many systems that are running our software. If, this causes a system crash, what's going to be the consequence of that? The developer wasn't thinking about any of those things. And we're building a world where more and more people are really involved in their own problems and don't really have a reason to look at the broader context or surround. We have experts in their particular domains, but they don't necessarily understand how their work connects to everything else. So, for example, many of you may remember Gennaro. The moment he saw the dinosaurs, his mind went, we're going to make a fortune with this place. And then you have this classic situation of, so what is a raptor? What is a dinosaur really? And, to Hammond, who is an entrepreneur, it's like, well, it's a money printer. And to Wu, it's like, this is version 4.4 of the genetic code. He's hyper-focused. He's like, this version 1, version 2, we made these changes to the genes. And the only one person who knew anything about dinosaurs on the island was Alan Grant, who was the paleontologist. And he's like, the moment he saw the raptors, he was quite concerned because he knew what a raptor is and, what these things are. So he's thinking at a deeper level about what this creature is, what it represents, what it means to have a raptor alongside humans, whereas everybody else was just focused on, what it meant for their part of the problem. Now, here's another recent incident I want to talk about. So just a few days ago, Linus Tech Tips, one of the largest YouTube channels, his Twitter got hacked. And it started promoting these, like fake giveaways and stuff. Happens a lot these days. And I made a video about it on my channel. It's quite popular. Trying to talk about targeted attacks. Now, I purposefully made this thumbnail. Some people were like, it's a little bit mean. I was like, well, the reason for making the thumbnail this was I knew a lot of people would be feeling this way. They would want to blame Linus. They would want to say, well, he's an idiot. Like, how can you be one of the largest tech YouTubers and not understand how to protect your own systems? And of course, in the video, I go into details about all the phishing campaigns that I receive, including, the kind of, campaigns that have been attacking political figures in the United States and how sophisticated they are. A lot of attacks today are targeted. So, for example, I set up a newsletter, and then a few days later, I get an alert saying, oh, your Mailgun account is compromised. You need to reset your password. So it's not a case of these attackers just spamming their generic campaigns to everyone. We have a situation where they're following you individually. If you're a popular YouTuber, if you're an important person at an organization, somebody's out there looking for you, looking at your behavior, looking at what you're posting on social media, and using that information to create an attack that you're likely to fall for. And attacks like that are very difficult to avoid because it's not just a question of following general practices, because they may not apply. Because this is a psychological war between you and this other person that's trying to get the better of you. And I talked about this in great detail in the video. I showed them a lot of different, emails I received. This is one where, we're getting emails about bidding for, some kind of contract in cybersecurity. So these are not generic emails. Now, I know the keynote spoke about the Nigerian prince emails, but that's the point. These emails are targeted. So I'm not going to get the Nigerian prince email. As a YouTuber, I will get emails asking for people to sponsor my channel, or I'll get, Mailgun security alerts, or I'm going to get, as a company, emails that are asking us for our services. You might get different emails. But of course, these were the comments on the video. So most people ignored the point and, looked at the title and said, yes, Linus is stupid. I'm smart. I could never fall for this. He's an amateur. He doesn't know anything about technology. I do. And this is also very reminiscent of the kind of problem we're talking about in Jurassic Park, which is this idea that until it happens to you, this could never happen to us, right? Like, and this was very common notion. Every time Malcolm would bring up how these systems are unstable, they'd be like, oh, of course, that system was unstable, but, not ours, because we have all of these control mechanisms, and we have our special recovery procedures. Which brings us to that, recovery procedures. So, again, this is a great example of chaos theory. If you remember, when they're trying to get the power back and turn on the electric fences in Jurassic Park, one of the things that happens is the visitors who actually, Grant and the kids are trying to get over this fence, which leads to another, chase sequence where they're trying to get around the fence, and that's when the power is being turned on. So the very thing that they're trying to do to recover the systems is the thing that's endangering the people they're trying to save. And again, it's a great example of how things may not have the intended effect, right? When you're doing something, it doesn't necessarily imply the outcome is going to be exactly what you expect, because you don't know the full situation. So obviously, the outcome of Jurassic Park's cybersecurity incident was, the demolishment of the business, which is what happens, unfortunately, in a lot of, ransomware attacks. Victims are locked out. You have data breach. Again, Jurassic Park, exact same situation. You have your, critical business assets stolen by a competitor, or, what happens these days is they're just leaked. So how do we deal with all of these problems? Now, one of the ways I like to think about it is, you don't know anything until you test it. So how does modern cybersecurity stack up? I mean, surely we've fixed all these problems by now. But, I'll show you instead of just talking about it. So a couple weeks ago, we did a test of all the major EDR providers against fairly realistic, basic ransomware simulation. And I'm just going to play the video, and you can see what happens. So basically, so you understand the context of the test, we're trying to see if our data would be encrypted in a ransomware incident. So I'm just going to play the video. And we have Microsoft, Bitdefender, SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, and Sophos. So probably heard these names. So we're going to start off with Microsoft, and as you can see, our data gets encrypted. Nothing really happens. Try Bitdefender. To its credit, it does, block it. It detects the attack. SentinelOne, very popular EDR solution. Many of you may have it in your environment. Did not block it at all. CrowdStrike. This is the one of, after the update was fixed. And again, our data was encrypted. Now, just to be clear, I don't work for any of these companies. So Sophos did block it. So again, a lot of major EDR solutions did not block basic ransomware behavior. And if you want to watch the whole video, by the way, it's on my channel. And so what am I trying to get at with all of this? One of the things, like, how do we approach fixing the mindset of Jurassic Park? Here's the quote from the book about what the reaction when this data was presented, when Malcolm presented his papers. So Malcolm's models, they have a ledge, sharp incline, where there's a speeding up movement, like, a drop of water over your hand as he does the demonstration in the movie. And it suggests the whole system could suddenly collapse. And that is what he said about Jurassic Park. The system had inherent instability. And what did you do when you get this report? Gennaro said. We disagreed with it and ignored it, of course. Was that wise? So the common reaction when data is presented that we don't like is exactly that. You may think, well, not really. I mean, I like to listen to feedback. We like to listen to feedback, but when the feedback fundamentally is something you're not prepared to accept. For example, the video I just posted. I mean, almost everybody who was using CrowdStrike or SentinelOne responded saying it was misconfigured. Now, I mean, I've been testing these products for a long time, and it wasn't just configured by me. There are several professionals who went through the configurations before we ran these tests. But the initial reaction that everybody who's invested in such an expensive solution and is running it, there has to be something wrong. This can't be right. And the easiest thing to do is to, say there must be something wrong with the test. So I want to give them some credit, though. So cybersecurity is a really hard problem, as was Jurassic Park. And why is it hard? Well, part of it is because we're always trying to simplify. So we have something called detection problems. So you have threat actors, which are complex, things. Like they deploy different techniques, like malware, phishing email, social engineering. And we're often trying to simplify it into a behavior that we can map and we can detect. So it's like trying to take a three-dimensional model that's continuously evolving, and you're trying to map it into this 2D space, and you're always going to miss some context. And another, takeaway from Jurassic Park is just the amount of change that we can adapt and keep up with. One of my favorite quotes from Jurassic Park during the dinner scene is from Alan Grant, who said the world is changing so radically, and we're all just running to catch up. Great example, Microsoft Recall. It's like, we're not really prepared for the cybersecurity consequences of storing screenshots of every single thing you do on your computer. Of course, Microsoft backtracked this after the feedback, and everybody panicked. It's like, what are we doing? We're literally building a keylogger into our systems. So how do we come up with features? Like, somebody worked on this for 6 months to a year. And this brings us to another quote from Jurassic Park. Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. So this is very relevant in the world of AI. We're often talking about problems in terms of what can we solve, not necessarily does this actually help anybody. Like, okay, we have this technology, now what? A lot of generative AI is like, oh, there's generative AI. Let me make a version of this for our app. Let me make an app out of this. And we're often doing these things without really asking the question of, does this help us? And I think it's very important in the field of cybersecurity to think the same ways. Like, if you're implementing a tool or a control, or you're introducing something new to the system, how does this actually help you protect the systems? Do the tests, figure out, is this going to stop a ransomware attack? Is this actually going to make my organization more secure, rather than just add a bunch of bells and whistles because, well, they have it, and everybody's doing this thing, so we got to do this EDR. That's not enough. We need XDR now. One of the funny things in the previous test I showed you is the version of Bitdefender I tested there wasn't even the EDR version. It was just the free antivirus that's been around forever. And it blocked the ransomware. And the sophisticated EDR solutions didn't. Now, even if, I buy the criticism of, well, I didn't configure them well enough. Well, we had a solution that didn't need to be configured. That you could just double-click and install, and it could block the thing. And now we have a solution that you need hundreds of experts to configure, apparently, and it still doesn't block the thing. So is that really an upgrade? Now, of course, I'm not suggesting a unidimensional analysis of it, but this is a core argument in Jurassic Park, right? Like, it's like, I don't get this Luddite attitude, especially from a scientist. And this is, again, a very common response that I get when I suggest, well, you're a cybersecurity person. You should be, talking about the latest tools and, telling everybody to adopt them as fast as possible. Here's another quote from Crichton. So in one of the discussions, Malcolm, the main philosophical character, says what advances? The number of hours devoted to housework has not changed since 1930. With all the vacuum cleaners, washer dryers, trash compactors, why does it still take as long to clean the house as it did in 1930? Because there haven't been any advances. And of course, that doesn't mean there haven't been any advances at all, but what we have a tendency of doing is going around in circles and changing the problems. So maybe we had different problems before, now we've got a bunch of tools that translate them into other problems. But the fundamental issue remains the same. And I think that's something to think about whenever you're trying to make progress in cybersecurity. Instead of just making changes and we need to get the right metrics in terms of what progress actually means. What are the key metrics in terms of protecting your business? Does it mean blocking unauthorized access? Does it mean preventing a certain type of incident or making it less likely, and actually measuring that, as opposed to, well, we've changed this statistic from this to this. And I did spend some time in Bristol, and I think nowhere is that more apparent that change isn't always progress. You can tell me your opinions on this, after the talk. I'd love to hear them. But thank you all for listening. I want to keep it, on time. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in. And if you have any questions, do feel free to ask. I think we have few minutes for questions. And also, for those of you who are interested, we have a pretty nice Discord community of cybersecurity professionals. So if you'd like to join, the link is on the screen.
Are there any questions from anyone? Go on.
Go ahead.
Related to the test that you did,
Yeah.
somewhere in some ER products, do you have any general insights when it comes to purple team exercise and companies? So, for example, at my place, at my company, we have a dedicated purple team. They don't have really a good name, unfortunately. There is a bunch of products in the market that try to solve this. For example, SAR. They are basically a GUI on I can't remember the name of the framework. Basically, they let you create an executable from a bunch of commands, and they market this as, well, you can now, without any coding knowledge, try to emulate APT behavior.
Right.
And I have seen those examples, and
Yeah.
they aren't very good at all.
Yeah.
So the question, I guess, here is any experience with that? So I assume you are working with some other citizens.
We work with our own tools, so yeah, I'm not aware of the third-party tools that you may use to automate.
I'm talking about the approach, not the tools. So, for
Right.
example, what languages are you using? Because in our experience, we are using Defender.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, Defender relies a bit too heavily on static analysis of files, even though it's an ETR, so it should work
Yes.
behavior, right?
Yeah.
So we are seeing very different results. If basically the same behavior of an example ransomware is made in C, C++, versus
Yes.
Java. So did you take that into consideration? What do you use for your own?
Yes, but again, I would to turn the question around. I would say if the way to get your malware to bypass one of the most popular EDR solutions is just to code it in different language, is that really good EDR protection, right?
No, that's absurd.
So I think it's important to answer your question, yes. We do know that there are certain languages that are easier to detect. And one of the things we like to do when we're doing our tests is to make it as difficult for them to detect things statically, because static detections are, they're unreliable at best, no day zero malware, because the tests we're doing are also the tests that cyber criminals will do. So if you're going to deploy a major, ransomware at an organization, the cyber criminals also have access to VirusTotal. They're going to upload their sample to VirusTotal, and if it's detected by Defender, they're not going to use that sample. They'll obfuscate it. They'll increase the size. They'll do something in order to get it to be undetected on VirusTotal, and then they'll do the attack. So sure, it's great that we're able to classify millions of existing malware using static techniques in known languages and things like that, but doesn't really work very well when it comes to preventing real-world attacks today.
Do you know what Defender, what Microsoft support said when you originally raised the issue to them? They said that, Defender doesn't consider this not malware because it was compiled on the machine it was run on.
Interesting.
So,
that's a different issue, though. That's an issue of, trust, right? If you're, do you trust something that was compiled on your computer versus a different computer? And some of that, again, these are complex questions in terms of what should be detected, because you don't want false positives either. But the example I showed, for example, there's no such thing. It was compiled on a different system. We brought the malware sample in, purely tested the behavior. So there's no case of oh, maybe this should not have been considered as malicious encryption behavior.
Okay, I'm really sorry, we're going to have to finish that there because we need to get out the room and get it ready for the next one in 5 minutes. So there's 2 exits. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Rohit.
Thank you.